Look, this book's called Fresh Fields. It was in Australian schools, primary schools and secondary schools in the 1950s and the 1960s. This isn't the copy from my school or my schools. This I found in a second-hand shop, a junk shop, and it used to belong to someone in St Catherine's School, Waverley. That's in Sydney. Now, would St Catherine's School be an Anglican school or a Catholic school or an Anglican school? Anyway, and it must be, both homophobic religions. And remember, this is a book that was published in the Australian edition, first published in 1956. It was probably published in Britain a couple of years earlier. Now we're going to be reading a poem from this book, and I'm claiming that it's a paedophile poem or a paederast poem, written by Walter James Turner. Ecstasy is the name of the poem. Back in when this was published, yes, I think it's out of copyright now anyway, because anyway, when this was published, the author's representatives and Messrs. Sidgwick and Jackson Limited were his legal representatives for publishing, but I think it's all out of copyright now. If you know otherwise, please let me know. Now, I'll just read a little bit about the author first. Walter James Redfern Turner, born 1889 to 1946. Born in Melbourne, came to London when he was 17. He was music critic of the New Statesman, drama critic of the London Mercury, and literary editor of the Spectator. He wrote novels including The Aesthetes, 1927, Blow for Balloons, 1935, and The Duchess of Popocatepetl. Is that Inca or something? Popocatepetl, 1939. Volumes of verse including The Dark Fire, 1918, Pursuit of Psyche, in 1931, and Songs and Incantations, 1936. A play, The Man Who Ate the Poppermac, 1922, and books on Beethoven, Mozart, and Wagner. This is just a little bit out of a book before the internet was invented. Yes, something from an old library book, some notes of mine from the old pre-internet days. And here's his poem, Ecstasy. Now, I'm going to argue that it's a paedophile poem. I do recall my teacher when I was 12 years old reading from this book in my primary school. It was in my school library, mind you, my primary school library, and in my high school library. And it was on the shelves. And these were very homophobic times. We're talking about when gay men are jailed for consensual sex. And that was the same case in Britain as well. I'm not making any judgments about paedophilia here or paederasty. I like to keep an open mind about these things. I like to keep an open mind about the age of consent. If it's 1 minute before midnight when you're 16, you're underage, aren't you? But yes, you'll find that Fred Nile didn't ask for this. Fred Nile, our local morals watchdog in New South Wales, didn't ask for this book to be banned. So we should be thinking about the psychological mechanism of of repression, it's called. What more can I say? Anyway, let's read the poem. Ecstasy. I saw a frieze on whitest marble drawn, of boys who sought for shells along the shore, their white feet shedding pallor in the sea, the shallow sea, the springtime sea of green, that faintly creamed against the cold, smooth pebbles. The air was thin, their limbs were delicate, the wind had graven their small eager hands to feel the forests and the dark nights of Asia behind the purple bloom of the horizon, where sails would float and slowly melt away. Their naked, pure and grave, unbroken silence filled the soft air as gleaming, limpid water fills a spring sky those days when rain is lying in shattered bright pools on the wind-dried roads, and their sweet bodies were wind-purified. One held a shell unto his shell-like ear, and there was music carven in his face, his eyes half closed, his lips just breaking open to catch the lulling, mazy coralline roar of numberless caverns filled with singing seas. And all of them were hearkening as to singing of far-off voices, thin and delicate, voices too fine for any mortal wind to blow into the halls of mortal ears, and yet those sounds flowed from their grave, sweet faces, and as I looked I heard that delicate music, and I became as grave, as calm, as still as those carved boys. I stood upon that shore. I felt the cool sea dream around my feet. My eyes were staring at the far horizons, and the wind came and purified my limbs, and the stars came and set within my eyes, and snowy clouds rested upon my shoulders, and the blue sky shimmered deep within me, and I sang like a carven pipe of music. That's by Walter James Turner. Now, if you read this poem, first off, you might think it's just a poem about boys by the sea. But if you read it over and over again aloud, it will start to drip with eroticism, homoeroticism. And I don't know what age, I don't know what age the boys were, but this is an erotic poem. It is a homoerotic poem, and it looks to me like a poem about man-boy love. It's either about paederasty or paedophilia. Yes. And it's just interesting. The only reason it can be on the shelves through the 1950s and 60s is because people just, they switched off to it with repression. What other reason can there be? Now, nothing is spelt out. There's nothing overtly sexual. It's all implicit sexuality. That's why the author got away with it. Well, I say got away with it. I'm not accusing him of anything. He may have been a virgin for all I know. He might have not ever acted on his homosexual impulses. He might never have been with a boy. But the fact is, this is a poem about man-boy love. And I'm just bringing it to the attention of the world on the internet and just showing what the world is like. It's quite a nice poem, really. It's about identification. I'm not implying there's anything that isn't virtuous. I'm not saying the man wasn't virtuous. He may have well been a virtuous person. This is about his feelings and their sexual feelings for boys. Their sexual feelings for boys. There's no mistake about it.